Hello and welcome to Campaign Daily, where we bring you all of the latest on election 2016. Now, a little later, we're going to be looking at gender quotas and the impact that they could have on the next Dáil. We're also going to be hearing from the Labour Party as they launch their education manifesto. And of course, we'll have our political panel. As always, we welcome your views. You can contact us via Twitter or email. Now, last night saw the 7-way leaders debate in Limerick. No huge gaffes, no huge victories. What impact is it all going to have? To discuss this, I'm joined now by three people who are watching it very closely. By Stephen O'Leary, social media analyst with Olytico, by John Downing, political correspondent with the Irish Independent, and by our own Brian Dowling from RTE's political staff. Stephen, you're with us. You are a social media expert. You analyse what goes on social media. How overall did it play out last night? We're going to take a look at some graphics in a moment, but first, your overall impressions.
Yeah, I mean, the debate got people talking, and I think that's probably one of the only things we can say definitively. There are going to be lists of the parties who won and lost on social media, and in truth, taking into account volume, taking into account sentiment and other elements, I think it's very difficult for anybody to say a particular leader or a particular party won on Twitter or on a social network last night. Now, it is interesting that the numbers went up from the debate last week. So we had 50% more tweets sent using #LeadersDebate.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the actual numbers first, and then we'll go through it. Okay, we'll go through it rather. Now, on Facebook, it has 2.5 million users here in Ireland. Joan Burton was the most mentioned candidate there, followed by the Taoiseach Enda Kenny, the Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams, and Fianna Fáil's leader Micheál Martin came in fourth. Moving on to look at the parties, Fine Gael was the most mentioned by Facebook users during the debate, followed by Sinn Féin and Labour. Then if we move to Twitter, there were nearly 60,000 election or debate-related tweets between 9:30 and 11:30 last night. Social Democrat Stephen Donnelly was the most mentioned, followed by Gerry Adams, Enda Kenny, Joan Burton and Richard Boyd Barrett. Now, interesting, here with Twitter, we can look at the sentiment expressed in those tweets. It's not just mentions, it's whether they were good or bad. Stephen Donnelly recorded the highest level of positive commentary at 52%. That's the area you can see there in green. Now, finally, to get a sense of where the Twitter users who were commenting on the election and the debate were actually located yesterday, Twitter has generated this heat map. This tracks the volume of tweets throughout the day, the bright spots being the areas of most activity. And that's the time of day down below. And you can see, Stephen, there, I mean, Ireland really lighting up hugely at around the time that the debate went live.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is absolutely what we would expect.
And that's just people talking about the Irish debate now.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? The diaspora, we see it.
Absolutely, and I suppose this is the beauty of being able to watch a TV programme from anywhere in the world. And, you know, we know that there are an awful lot of Irish people who've emigrated. There's a lot of people who have an interest in what's going on here in terms of the outcome of this. I do think, though, particularly when you look, for example, at leaders that were mentioned the most, parties that were mentioned the most, that there has to be a sound of caution around this in what you can actually tell about the leaders or parties based on that. Volume should not be confused with endorsement, and often it is. Being the most talked about on a social network is not necessarily a sign that a lot of people particularly like what you did. So the sentiment helps. It definitely adds an extra layer, but even at that, to take 40,000 or 60,000 pieces of content and use an algorithm to try and assign sentiment to them, it's very nuanced. There's an awful lot of sarcasm in Ireland, amongst other things.
Yeah, and it's very difficult, I would imagine, to measure. But I mean, the real thing about social media, it's not really about getting people to decide which way to vote, is it? The evidence is that it's more about getting people to vote at all.
100%. And I think if we look at the referendum last year, that was one of the biggest success stories. So an awful lot of people who have discussed the social media outcomes of the marriage referendum say, well, it had a massive impact on helping people to decide how they were going to vote. In truth, it didn't change an awful lot of minds. What it did was it managed to get an awful lot of people who probably would have been relatively passive and maybe wouldn't have gone to polling stations. And
it remains to be seen, though, whether it will have the same impact in a general election. 40 different elections taking place.
It does, and it's one of the big concerns that's being raised again and again. However, what we are seeing is, even on Twitter, photographs of young people queuing outside Garda stations looking to be put on the registered list of
It would be great to see the numbers voting going up.